With the win here, does Duke all but lock up the number 1 overall seed on Selection Sunday to you?
I think they're certainly heading in that direction, but I do think there's a chance that Arizona could grab it from them because Arizona's got a couple of big games still to play. And then the Big 12 tournament, although it's hard to know how much the conference tournaments really matter in the seeding. I saw that was a big fight on Twitter the other day with Seth Davis and some other people who had been in that mock selection process. But it's harder, I think, for Duke because there's not a ton of opportunities left. Obviously, Virginia's a good team, but the ACC, even though it's better this year, it's really not going to give them more top 10 wins, I don't think, heading into the home stretch here. So if they can get this one, I think number 1, they will be a 1 seed probably in the East. But number 1 overall, I just think there's opportunities for a couple teams to kind of come up from behind just because of strength of schedule.
As we're talking about number 1 overall, let's talk about a team that used to be number 1 overall in Michigan after losing to Duke and Washington, D.C. No rest for the weary, as you know that very well. Dan Wolken, they head to Champaign for a little top 10 matchup against Illinois. What do you want to see from Michigan to kind of bounce back after that loss to Duke?
Yeah, look, every team is going to have some stretches during the season where they're not quite as sharp. And you look at how fast Michigan got out of the gate this year. They were just killing everybody in November and December. They were not going to be able to sustain that, especially as you get into Big Ten play and you have to go on the road. Obviously, the Duke game was an out-of-conference game, but still probably a road environment for them. I think they're fine. I don't really have any questions about Michigan as a real Final Four type contender. Obviously, to go and beat Illinois this weekend would add more to their resume, but as long as they don't just crater down the stretch, I think they're well coached enough. They're a very veteran team, a bunch of guys, Cadeau and Laxenberg, like they've been around, and so I just feel like Michigan's fine, and they're the best team in the Big Ten as far as I'm concerned, regardless of whether they win this game.
Yeah, Fox on Friday nights with these Big Ten matchups, it's just been electric. Big Ten basketball this year is just It's a slugfest every single time. All right, we got a bunch of stars, obviously. Those two, they're top 2 teams off the board. Number 3 is Arizona. They have Darren Peterson taking on Kansas. If Darren Peterson is there, I mean, I don't know what to make of Darren Peterson at this point. So are there red flags at this point with Arizona? How do you feel about Arizona right now?
I really like Arizona, and I think as of today, they'd probably be the team I picked to win it all. And the reason is their physicality. And I really think you look at the size they have on the wings, and you see Karchenkov there. I mean, he's a big physical defensive guy. So they're good on the first line of defense. Obviously, they've got big bodies inside with Koa Pete and Tobe Awaka and Krivas. So they've got girth and length in the middle, and that's tough to score on. And so I think just defensively, they can win ugly games, which I think you have to do in the NCAA tournament because you're probably not going to shoot the 3 all that well every single game. And I think they have the right ingredients, which maybe they didn't have in previous versions of Arizona under Tommy Lloyd. Maybe they were a little softer, a little too reliant on skill and shooting. This team is just very, very tough to play, and I think that serves them well in a tournament where you got to win playing different styles.
Tomorrow we'll also see AJ Debonsa in action as BYU takes on West Virginia. And BYU's been struggling as of late. Lost 6 of their last 9. Richie Saunders is lost for the season. He was their second leading scorer. Without him, they've lost 2 of their last 3. So what's your concern level for this BYU squad as we head into March?
Yeah, well, it's interesting in sort of the way that they play. I'm not sure that Debonsa is necessarily the best fit for the way that I think Kevin Young wants to play, and maybe a little bit more, sort of an equal opportunity kind of offense. But with obviously not at full strength, I do think they need him to score. And so I think their success probably will come down in how far they go in March to whether or not Debonsa can put this team on his back and make a bunch of jump shots and give him that high volume shooting diet and see if he can execute. I would bet against that being sustainable to get to a Final Four. But that may be the way they have to play coming down the stretch here. And, yeah, like if he's not playing great and he's a freshman, and who knows if he's hitting the physical wall a little bit, these are question marks, real question marks with BYU, because as the season's gone on, it does seem like they've lost a little bit of steam.
You're talking about DeBonsa there. We already talked about Peterson, unreliable at times with Kansas. I know Boozer might be the outlier, but what can we learn right now, considering how obsessed we all are with some of these young guys that are one and done headed to the draft, but their teams are not necessarily having the success that maybe we thought they would have? What's that say about the way teams are going to continue to approach these superstars in future years?
Yeah, well, I think it's very interesting in team building right now. If you're a coach of one of these top programs, how much do you want to invest in the Darren Peterson type of player? Because obviously he's super talented. And again, I'm not going to write them off or write him off. You've still got March to go, and that's the most important part of the season. And maybe he is reliable as they come down the stretch. But I think in retrospect, Kansas probably would have been better off taking whatever amount of money it is they invested in Peterson and maybe spreading it out to 2 or 3 other guys that could really help them with their depth and maybe give them a little different look. Obviously would be a lot more reliable in the lineup than what Peterson's been. So these are very, very important philosophies on team building. On the other hand, you look at Duke, and they've been very reliant on freshmen and one and dones, and it's worked for them. And some of that may come down to the fact that Boozer is just a winner. Every level he plays at, high school, AAU, whatever it's been, his teams have won because not only is he individually talented, but he helps elevate everybody around him. And, that's the rare kind of freshman I think that you could really bank on. But, that's why he's going to be a top 4 or 5 pick, maybe even the number 1 pick, despite not being the most athletic guy in the class.
We're talking about all these blue bloods in college basketball and have yet to mention Kentucky. They don't look like a blue blood this year. They've lost 3 of their last 4, not in the top 25, tied for 5th place in the SEC. That's not the Kentucky standard, the Kentucky expectation, especially when you look at John Calipari with Arkansas in the top 25 and an opportunity to knock off a top 10 team in Florida tomorrow. What's the concern level for Mark Pope and this Kentucky squad?
Yeah, I think most people in Kentucky have just already written this year off as a failure. Who knows? Things can happen in March, and maybe they end up in a Sweet 16 and everybody's feeling good. But as of right now, it looks like they just invested in the wrong guys. They were very loud going into this season about how much money their roster was worth. And I think there was a number $22 million thrown out there. Kentucky never denied that. Some people I talked to who were very well informed on this stuff say it's actually even higher than that. So you have to look at that and say, well, where did the money go? What did they invest it in? And obviously in the transfer portal era, you have to evaluate almost perfectly, or else you're going to be stuck with a bunch of guys making a lot of money who are not helping you win ball games. And it just looks to me like Kentucky kind of spent irresponsibly and maybe didn't do their homework and didn't think enough about fit. It's just a roster of ill-fitting pieces. Admittedly, some of them have been injured, and it's been hard for them to get in the flow this year. But I just don't look at that team and think that's $22 million worth of talent.
$22 million. When you say that out loud, it's jarring, Dan. I mean, that's a lot of money for where they are in expectations. So I keep thinking this season about, I'm a little brother, and every once in a while I would feel like, I get kind of bowed up and I feel like I could take my big brother down. And then he would just remind me violently that I was not as strong or tough as he was. That's what UConn has done a few times this year. I feel like we pay attention to all these new sensations, and then UConn turns around and reminds us that they're UConn. Why are we not more focused on the success of a proven program like UConn and Hurley in this year particularly?
Well, they've had some ups and downs this year, and I think they've kind of fallen off the radar at times after some kind of confusing losses. And they're very good. They're tracking toward a number 1 seed. I do think maybe some of that comes down to the Big East not really being all that great. Like, who are they playing in that conference that we really feel like is a legitimate Elite 8 type of team? I mean, they certainly did a number on St. John's. St. John's is good. But yeah, like when you look at the pedigree and the tournament success that Dan Hurley had over that 2-year stretch, I don't think anybody wants to see them in the NCAA tournament. He seems to be able to give them the confidence. And he's tough, right? And he's a tear you down to build you back up type of coach. But when it comes to March, they do seem to play with a lot of confidence. And I would say even last year, when they took Florida down to the wire and was really probably the toughest game Florida played in the tournament until the final, until they played Houston. So even though that's a second round loss, like that UConn team was playing well at the right time. And if they do that again this year, and certainly that game against St. John suggests they are tracking toward that, they're going to be a tough out.
I want to stick on this game for a second because I think it was a jarring result. Did you learn more about UConn in a dominant win or St. John's in a game where it felt like they could not get anything going offensively?
I'm just treating it a little bit like an outlier at this point because we've certainly seen St. John's play a lot better than that. And every coach will tell you go through a season, you're going to have 2 or 3 games where you just can't do anything right. And you're going to have 2 or 3 games where it feels like everything you do is perfect. Every call you make works. And I think that was just one of those games where that was UConn's outlier good game and St. John's outlier bad game. I don't think those two teams are 30 points apart.
Okay, so in fairness, I'll call myself out. I just mentioned UConn. We're not talking about them. Now we've mentioned Florida briefly. I mean, Florida is the defending champions, and we're not talking about them at all. So what do you make of Florida this season?
Well, when I've watched Florida, I think the thing that you notice most is what they've got inside and just how good those big guys are. I mean, Houck is tremendous, and his skill set and the way he is able to create mismatches both offensively and defensively and recover and protect the rim. That makes Florida, I think, just different. They're different to play because of those big guys, and that will carry them a long way. I don't particularly love their guards. I haven't all year, but the way they play, I think, gives them a good chance to repeat or go back to a Final Four. On the other hand, foul trouble, I think, is the one thing. You get a tournament game called a different way, and Houck's in foul trouble. That could get a little scary for them because I just don't know that they have the guards that are going to put a team on their back. So, but inside, like, they're just different, and I think nobody really can match up with them in that way.
And so we're talking about all of these teams that look like national championship contenders. There's been a lot of jockeying at the top of the AAP top 25. You have Houston, you have Florida, you have UConn, you have Duke, you have Michigan. The list goes Houston. The list goes on and on. If you had to pick today on February 27th, and I know we're putting you on the hot seat, who would be your pick to win it all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go Arizona right now because I just feel like the physicality that they are able to bring to the table inside is really going to play into their hands in the tournament. I mean, they don't shoot it great. They don't shoot a ton of threes. So they're a little bit of a throwback type of team. But in some ways, I kind of like that for them. And they will, get to their spots and take mid-range shots. And, they also have guys like Jaden Bradley, who's a proven clutch performer. You can give the ball to him down the stretch of a game, and he's going to make good decisions. Burries can get it going and score in bunches. And obviously, Koa Pete has been a beast all season. And they just get a bunch of stuff from, they've got their 8 guys, and they get different stuff from all of them. And it really gives them a lot of lineup variance and different ways to play. And, I think they're just tough. And I like the way they're shaping up as we get into March. They've won, beaten some good teams already. The way they beat Houston the other day, very, very impressive. So they had a little 2-game losing streak. I think some of their guys were sick or injured. So at full strength, I think they're the best team.